That the motion be agreed to. I call the Honourable Amy Adams.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Madam Speaker, I come down to take a call on the second reading of what is an incredibly poorly designed, badly conceived, poorly implementable piece of legislation that is a response to the issue of housing affordability, that it comes from a place of a total misunderstanding and misrepresentation of the realities of that housing issue. Now, Madam Speaker, this whole approach came from some dog whistle politics that said it was all because of foreign buyers. That was the reason New Zealanders couldn't buy houses. Foreign buyers were the problem, and if we just stopped that, everything would be fine. Well, here's the problem that the government has. The data just doesn't bear that out. Madam Speaker, under the national government, we put in place data collection to understand exactly how many foreign investors were buying residential properties. And you know what that data told us? Well, I can tell you that for many consecutive quarters now, it's shown us around 3% foreign buyers in any given quarter. But wait, well, 3%. But if you take off the number of foreign sellers, the net number, the net increase in foreign ownership is sitting at around 1%. 1%. And yet this is the big panacea from this bumper sticker slogan, don't worry about the data, we don't read evidence we don't like, why would you bother with evidence, let's just stick to the nonsense we've been peddling for a few years, despite what the data tells us. Madam Speaker, if this government was serious about housing supply or housing affordability, here's what they'd do. They would grow supply of housing, and they would be relentless in ensuring that they did everything they needed to make it easier to build houses, to create developments, to hire workforce, to create a market where people wanted to buy and invest in houses. And what are they doing? They are doing everything they can to turn off the landlord market through changing negative gearing, through bringing in capital gains taxes, through changing the costing on landlords so that, frankly, landlords are going out of the market in a roar. They're turning off the tap of foreign investors, because foreign investors are saying to me just about every day, certainly every week, why would we invest in New Zealand? New Zealand has the closed for business sign up. We are not interested in investing in a country where the government is going to be this unpredictable, uncertain and punitive based on so little good information. We're not interested in funding developers, and that is why we're seeing, and my colleague Judith Collins knows this very well, that's why we're seeing developers struggling to get developments up. So what's happening now, you've got Phil Twyford riding on his white, well I would say horse, but it's probably a donkey, coming in saying, well, all of those developments that now can't proceed because the developers no longer can get finance because of the actions of this government, well, we'll rebadge a few of them Kiwi Build, and somehow that's adding to housing supply. Well, we've got news for Mr Twyford and Mr Parker. If you're not growing housing supply, you will never fix problems of home affordability. This bill is quibbling around the edges of demand. If you are mucking around with 1% of the residential housing market, you're not seriously making a difference. And this bill, Madam Speaker, does exactly that. The answer lies in growing supply. And if you look at the work that happened under our government, led by my colleague Dr Nick Smith and others, here's what we did. We put in place the unitary plan in Auckland to make sure that land could be intensified. We put in place special housing areas across the country to bring land to market quickly. We put in place the Housing Infrastructure Fund so that the houses could get built. We supported the construction sector by enabling people to bring in the workforce that they needed, and we absolutely made it sure that the international development market was available and wanted to come to New Zealand. That is why, when this government left when the previous government left office, when the national government left office, we had a forecast of 100,000 houses to be built, not in 10 years, Mr Twyford, in 3. In 3 years, New Zealand was looking at another 100,000 houses being built by the private sector because we supported them. This legislation, Madam Speaker, will slow down development. Make absolutely no mistake about it. The signs are already there. Just today I've had 2 more developers and a foreign investor coming to me saying they are now not proceeding with major developments that they had planned because of this legislation. The legislation will make the problem worse. We heard that at the Select Committee time and time again. People coming before the committee who are in the business And on this side of the House, we listen to those who invest their money and make things happen. We don't think we know better than Treasury and MB and everyone else who talks to government. The developers came in and they said, this will slow down development. Now, my question for the Minister is, how does a bill that slows housing supply possibly help with home affordability? It absolutely does not. But then let's look at what's in the bill itself. And this is the really interesting thing, because the bill, despite all the big talk about how it was going to crack down on foreign ownership and carbon and stop this insidious nature of apparently the 1% or so of good people who come to New Zealand wanting to be part of and grow our economy, here's what it actually does. Well, first of all, we had a last-minute intervention from the Minister to include an SOP that would bring forestry into the overseas investment process. Oh, we thought, well, forestry's coming in. But look a bit deeper, and no sooner does forestry come in than the Minister effectively carves it straight out. So here's what players in the primary sector need to know. Forestry land, which is already 72% foreign-owned, apparently that's not enough for foreign ownership, and this government is doing all they can to make sure that the touch is as light as humanly possible. Forestry land under a forestry right with a profit a prond will only come into the Act now if it's more than 1,000 hectares being bought. But what's the equivalent for non-forestry viticulture land, for example? Well, the threshold for viticulture land in the same circumstances, 5 hectares. What? 5 hectares is the threshold. For forestry land, even if you're over 1,000 hectares, all you have to do is go through a pre-approval checklist, a self-certified checklist to say, don't worry, we'll plant some trees, and you're okay. You buy an investment into viticulture land over 5 hectares, and it's full bells and whistles, OAO process, and as my colleague Stuart Smith has mentioned already, will actually likely drive people into owning more viticulture land, because why would you go through a profit a prond where you can do that? It makes no sense, it is illogical, and it doesn't achieve any of the principles it said it seek to achieve. And that's just the beginning of the carve-outs. If you look into this legislation, it's like Swiss cheese. David Parker has achieved the almost unimaginable in that he has a bill that is a cold handbrake on development while still having so many holes in it. Anybody that is in favour will be able to apparently get their developments consented. We have this new beast in the legislation now called standing consents. Now, a standing consent effectively means you go to the Minister, you convince them that you're someone that they would want to deal with, and you get an open ticket to go and buy up as you will for the period of that consent. That doesn't sound like good process and a government that wants to stick true to its word to me. You've got a process now of exemption certificates, where certificates will be granted to developers if the government chooses to allow some sales off the plans. And for those apartments and those residential properties, they can be foreign-owned and they can be foreign-occupied. So all the big talk, again, if you get an exemption certificate from this government, under what sort of process we do not know and we have to wonder, you're okay. And there's even more. The government can now carve out by regulation anything it decides to let through. So next time there's a tough negotiation between Winston Peters and the Labour Party, or Shane Jones and one of his pet projects, you know it's going to get an exemption certificate or a regulatory carve-out. That is not good process. That is not the sort of principle-based legislation that this Parliament should be looking at. And then finally, Madam Speaker, we have this very questionable process of the exemption that the Minister tried to put in place for a single development in Northland, 75% owned by a Queenstown developer and an American developer. And isn't it interesting that David Parker took a pot shot at Hamish Walker for standing up for his community when that very minister told us today in question time he tried to bring through an exemption himself through Cabinet against Treasury advice for a Queenstown developer for high-end properties to be sold into the American market. Now, there is no good reason why that would be granted, none at all. And there are going to be some very serious questions continue to be asked about how it is that this minister who stands here and tells us that he is opposed to rich Americans buying our land tried to do exactly that against all advice, against Treasury advice, against Office of the Clerk advice, certainly against the strong concerns of others on this side of the House. Madam Speaker, this is a matter that there is going to be a lot more said about over the coming weeks.
Well said.
Speaker.
I call the Honourable Damien O'Connell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Another outrageous speech.